He says, I've been here 3 years. I said, why haven't you came to Juma? He said, because I didn't want anybody to know I was Muslim. I became very angry as an imam, and then I asked him his name. His name was Muhammad. I said, young man, you can't hide being Muslim with a name like that. I know everybody's hungry, and I know we've been fasting all day, and I won't be long, so I'm going to tell you like Elizabeth Taylor told her 4th, 5th, and 6th husband, don't get comfortable, I won't be here long. When I was thinking about my subject on what to bring to such an illustrious group, it was just some 19 years ago that I set out in that audience as a chaplain candidate, thinking about the person who was the guest speaker. And I was thinking honestly to myself, man, what an honor it must be to speak to the Muslims and the august body that's in this audience. But the second thing I was thinking about was my journey. When I put together this speech, I thought about all of the people who took this journey with me. All of the people who made the pledge to say that we were going to give our lives for this cause of Islam. I thought about, secondly, all the people who broke that pledge. All of the people who started with me, who when things got a little tough, most of them went back to their former religion. Some became atheists. Some went back to the streets of drinking and smoking and womanizing because this pledge, this mission, wore on them. It became all-consuming. And so they decided it was too much. Thirdly, I wanted this subject to ruminate, to be congruent with what we're going through now with Ramadan. Because Ramadan is an exercise in strength, patience, dedication, and really a war against yourself of discipline. So as any good Muslim would do, I went to the Quran for my subject. Now, my subject might make you a little uncomfortable if you're not comfortable with yourself. Secondly, my subject might make you a little uncomfortable if you're too comfortable with yourself as opposed to doing and being what God asks you to be. My subject comes from the Quran in Surah 9 and 42. The Quran says, "O you who believe, when you're asked to go out for the cause of God, why do you drag your feet? Do you find this world's life more pleasing to you than the life to come? Unless you strive earnestly," God is talking, He said, "I will bring a people to replace you." He says, "Go forth, whether light or heavy, strive for God's cause with your wealth and your soul." And the last ayat is my subject. I want you to listen to me. It says, if the journey was short and there was some immediate gain, they all would have followed you, but the journey was long and it weighed on them, and many of them made excuses. I'm going to say that again because I don't want you to miss that. If the journey was short and there was some immediate gain, they all would have followed you. But the journey was long and it weighed on them, and many of them made excuses. I think this subject is very profoundly talking about our responsibility as Muslims and a community. I think the average person hasn't grasped the implications of this kind of responsibility. To enter into a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a covenant, to strive with all that you have, your person, your wealth, without excuses. It's a serious responsibility. Most don't realize the pain that you have to go through with this type of responsibility, the hardships you have to go through, the disdain, sometimes prejudice, sometimes discrimination that is heaped upon you with this type of responsibility. Most come to this religion for peace, but God Allah says he needs a piece of you before you can get that piece. I'm going to say that again. Most come to this religion because it's a religion of peace. But God requires a piece of you before you can get that peace. You see, he says in the Quran, he says, I'm going to try you with something of fear, hunger, loss of life, loss of wealth, to see who is true and who is false. Because this journey is about the end state. This journey is about the big picture. You see, when you're talking about this journey of Islam and being a Muslim, there has to be some soul searching. There has to be some introspection, some self-reflection. The Quran says there are some people who say they believe, but they do not believe. They seek to deceive Allah and the believers, but they only fool themselves. This journey that we are on is akin to Ramadan. It's hard. It's taxing. It's an exercise that requires your innermost being. It takes mental strength and willpower to sustain yourself as a Muslim, as a believer, when all around you are sometimes doing things that are juxtaposed to what your values are. The Quran says, man faces not the uphill road. You see, when I think about this journey, I think about the sisters who have the courage to wear the hijab. When the whole world tells them that they are ignorant and uneducated, they say, what other people think about you ain't none of your business. She makes a decision to be modest. She makes a decision to take herself and say to herself, I'm going to follow what my God has revealed. I think of her courageousness to walk around and be stared at and be jeered at. People looking at her with a jaundiced eye because she is doing what her Lord has commanded her to do. For me, she will always have my utmost respect and all of my admiration. If the journey was short, they all would have followed you, but the journey was long and it weighed on them, and many of them made excuses. You can't make an excuse to be like everybody else, to fit in like everybody else. You have to have your own values, your own purpose, your own identity. When I think about this journey, I think about the men and women who are in uniform. They have the courage to stand up and fight for our country. When truth be told, some of the people in our own faith tradition say that we're not being loyal to Islam. On the other end of that, we have some people in our uniform who say we're not being patriotic enough. What courage it must take for a Muslim to wear this uniform.
That's right.
The journey was short and there was some immediate gain. They all would have followed you, but the journey was long and it weighed on them. And many of them made excuses. When I think about this journey, I think about my first duty station as a chaplain. I have to wipe my head. I'm sweating here. I think about my first duty station as a chaplain. I was so excited. I went through 3 years of study for school, seminary, and studying the Quran, Hadith sciences. I went to Morocco, got some great food. I went to Jordan to study some Arabic. I learned a couple of words. I was so excited to come back to active duty. I walk into my commander's office. I extend my hand to him. He pulls his hand back and he says, and I quote, "I'm sure you're a nice guy, but we have some problems with your religion and how you guys treat women. Have a nice day." He didn't talk to me for 9 months. He wouldn't answer my emails. He wouldn't call on me in staff meetings. All I could think about was the Prophet's words, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, don't get angry. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. I didn't cry. I didn't cry foul. I didn't go to EO. I went to work. I went to the community. I went to mentor soldiers. I did my job with excellence. I could have gotten angry. I could have beat him up. I'm bigger than him. We could have been doing this IFTAR at Leavenworth. But I went to work, and after 9 months, to his credit, wallahi, he came out in front of the battalion, 1,000 soldiers, and he said, I have wronged one of my officers. And he gave me a coin for excellence with tears in his eyes. And after he did that, he asked me to come to his house and pray for his family. The Quran says if the journey was short and there was some immediate gain, they all would have followed you, but the journey was long and it weighed on you. It weighed on them, and many of them made excuses. That was 20 years ago. What about today? Last duty station. Some 3 years ago, the commander in the meeting room would shake everybody's hand but mine. Everybody. This went on for 4 months. Alhamdulillah, I had already had experience with this. I went to work. I ended up doing a memorial service for one of the soldiers. After the memorial service, he came up and he hugged me with tears in his eyes. He said, thank you, I'm glad you're on our team. If the journey would have been short and there was some immediate gain, they all would have followed you, but the journey was long and it weighed on them, and many of them made excuses. What a responsibility we have to be ambassadors for this religion. We have been given the audacious responsibility to be Muslims in a time of chaos, confusion, and consternation over who we are as a people, over what our religion teaches, who we are as a religious body. But God has given us the task of educating a nation. It's no time to hide.